Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to cover a new DPS build for the Scourge. The Scourge was nerfed and it was previously played as a support class to give a lot of barriers and a lot of strips, but since the barriers were nerfed and also some cooldowns on the Scourge were nerfed, I tried to manage to figure out a newer build. So we don't run support anymore, but we run power, and we can do a decent amount of damage while also doing a lot of strips, maybe one of the best classes to do strips. You may be wondering why Scourge instead of Reaper. I know Reaper has a lot more damage compared to Scourge and similar strips, but Reaper in this meta is not really easy to play because people starting to play ranged again because of the barrier nerfs, so the ranged classes got more valuable because you can do actual damage and impactful damage from range even if you are not full melee, so it's really hard to commit to the enemies and to fight in a really tight melee scenario. So I think the Reaper is a bit worse than the Scourge because it has bad elite skills. Like the elite skill on the Reaper is not bad, but everyone has a stability, it's chilled to the bone. Here we have basically another well together with the Well of Corruption, and if you run the Greatsword you also have the skill 4, which is very similar to another well. Also the healing skill is some more boon strip, and also we have additional boon strips here. And then also the F1, F2, F3 and F4 and F5 are much easier to land than the Reaper. The Reaper, the skill 2, is actually really good damage, but it forces the movement, so it's not really easy to land. You could hit into the enemy and die. The skill 3 is a stability for yourself, which is nice, and also damage reduction is nice, but it's not really impactful on strips or damage. The skill 4 is super strong, and the skill 5 is useless. On the Scourge, everything is kinda useful. You have barrier, cleanses, boon strips, a lot of boon strips, you have an AoE fear, and this is multiplied for each shade and for yourself. So, and also while you use the Shroud skills on the Scourge, you can use the weapons skill, and this thing cannot be done on the Reaper because you have the Reaper Shroud skills. So in my opinion, the Scourge for now is a bit better, and also the barriers, I know they were nerfed. Now you can only give 25% of the barrier on of the maximum health of your allies and of yourself, but still I think you don't really need to be minstrel to cap this barrier stuff, because you can also have the F5, the skill 6 here, the sand flare, and also you have the traits if you want to get more barrier. You have the F3, so you really can cap the barrier limit with the Scourge even if playing DPS, and also supported by the Scrapper, which is another barrier provider. So I think the Scourge is superior in almost every aspect except the DPS aspect. The build is quite standard. We have Spite, Curses, and also Scourge, of course. We have Spiteful Talisman to reduce the recharge of the axe and focus skills, which I run, and I will explain later. And then we have this trait here, which makes our signets to remove an additional boon. So we run the Signet of the Locust, which already removes 1 boon per target, maximum 5 targets. So with this trait we will remove 2 boons from 5 targets, so it's a 10 boon removal. And then we have Spiteful Spirit. Whenever we enter Shroud, we will remove 2 boons from enemies. This trait is buffed in the latest patch, was buffed. So now we have 2 boons removed whenever we enter Shroud, around us of course, and if the enemies are below 50% HP, we will remove an additional boon from them, so it's 3 boons. On Curses, we run Insidious Disruption. Disabling a foe inflicts torments on them. I know it's not the best trait ever, but the other 2 are kinda useless. Then we have Shroud skill 2, now additionally converts boon into conditions. It's our F2. I know it increases the F2 cooldown by a lot because it's 18 seconds instead of 12 seconds, but still we will remove 1 boon from enemies from 2 targets around us and around each shade. So if you have 3 shades and yourself, you can remove up to 8 boons from enemies and convert them into an condition, sorry. And then we have Lingering Curse, which transforms our skill 3 from the Scepter, which was super strong some years ago. Then it was nerfed because they reduced the boon strip and also increased the cooldown. Now the cooldown got a small reduction, so maybe it's worth running again. And also the Greatsword was nerfed a lot, so I'm not really sure if running Greatsword is the best choice, but I will cover it later on the weapon aspect. And then on the Scourge I run Fell Beacon. Burning you inflict does more damage, gain expertise based on your condition damage. I know this is a condition trait, but still, each time at the end of the fight you will see your top skill on the damage on arc DPS. You will see Torment and Burning are your top skills to do damage on enemies. So I was also considering running some condition Scourge, but I prefer to have some more burst to generate more downies, because you can hit quite hard on some skills, especially like the skill 5 from the Focus, the skill 3 from the Scepter, or the skill 3 from the Axe, and also the Burst Explosion on the F5. They deal quite a lot of burst, so you can help generate downies with this. If you only care about numbers, probably on your arc DPS to have higher numbers you should go Condi on the stats on the armors, I mean, and weapons and trinkets, but I will cover it later. Then we have Sandstorm Shroud to buff our F5, which will make barrier, pulls, and at the end boon strip, AoE, and also additional barrier for everyone. And then we have Demonic Lore. This is the same purpose. I run Fell Beacon. Torment you inflict deals increased damage and causes your foes to burn. So we have a lot of Torment in our skills. We have also Torment whenever we interrupt. We have Torment on the F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, the skill 3 from the Scepter, the Trail of Anguish, the Ghastly Breach, the Sand Flare. So whenever we inflict this Torment, we will also inflict Burning, and so this is the explanation basically of why Torment and Burning are the most damageful skills or conditions in your arc DPS. And also 33% damage increase on Torment, which is a lot, so this explains basically everything. And in the future maybe I will cover some condition Scourge build. For the gears you need of course to reach 80 critical chance. I have 78.80 here, but I don't have the minor bloodlust from the Borderlands, so if I go on a Borderland I reach 80%. So we run Marauder, everything is Marauder as you can see, and we run also Precise Infusion and Superior Rune of the Scholar, which is the most damageful option. Then here is the weapon part. I run Axe together with the Warhorn and the Scepter together with the Focus. If you prefer, you can run also the Greatsword, and maybe you should skip the Axe for the Greatsword, or maybe the Scepter, depends on what the situation is. If you can fight melee, if you can fight ranged, the Scepter plus Focus is best for ranging and to do strips from AoE and to shut down a single target if all the Scourges focuses together the same target, or maybe the enemy commander. Axe Warhorn is more around you, more melee, more CCs, more damage, lower cooldown, but still maybe if you want to go for Greatsword I would recommend skipping this weapon kit, the Axe plus the Warhorn. I will explain every skill later and the usage properly. So we have Axe, Superior Sigil of Accuracy, and then we have the Warhorn, Superior Sigil of Absorption, because we have some interrupts. Whenever we interrupt, we can strip 3 boons from a foe, which is nice. And then we have the Scepter, Accuracy, and then the Focus, Nullification, remove a boon from a foe after striking from its flank or when they are defiant, 5 seconds cooldown. So this is additional boon strips. I know some people prefer to run maybe the Superior Sigil of Frenzy, which is this one, which will recharge our skills by 2 seconds whenever we kill an enemy with a cooldown of 10 seconds. And this includes weapon skills and also the skill from your utilities. So it's a really good sigil, the Superior Sigil of Frenzy, but it's only good if you are winning the fight and if you start getting kills. If the fights are really hard, I wouldn't recommend going for the Frenzy Sigil, because you need to get kills to snowball into the enemies. everything is Marauder, by the way, on the weapons, and also on the trinkets, everything is Marauder. And then the Relic of Cerus, which summons a rotating eye of Cerus that emits a rotating line attack, dealing damage and converting boons into conditions. So basically it's this thing, is to make additional boon strips on the enemies, additional damage. So our main purpose is to do boon strip, and we can do it really well if properly played. Let's take a look at the skills. We have the famous F1, which is the shade. You press this, F1, F1. You can have up to 3 shades up at the same time. And whenever you press F2, F3, F4 and F5, you pulse AoEs around you and around the shades, as you can see. So ideally, in an ideal scenario, you should be having like 3 shades on the ground and pressing your skills whenever you are also in melee, so you count as a shade, your body counts as a shade, so you can maximize the target's hit. So the F2, your shades convert a condition to nearby allies into a boon, and also a boon into conditions on enemies because of this trait on the course straight line. Then we have the F3, every shade will pulse a barrier around them. F4 will pulse some damage and AoE fear around the shade and around ourselves. And then we have the Sandstorm Shroud. You press the F5 and you and your shade will slowly pulse some barrier, and at the end you have a big burst of barrier and 2 boon strips from enemies and also an additional big barrier. So it's basically the best trait on the Scourge, this one, even if it was nerfed a lot. You see 45 seconds cooldown is a lot, but still it's the only way. And also, even if it's not really mentioned in the tooltip, I want to clarify that whenever you press skills from F2 to F5, you also apply Torment on the enemies. You see F2, Torment and Burning because of the trait, and also Bleeding because if you critically hit, you have a chance to inflict bleeding on enemies. So this is just a lot of condition spams and a lot of damage from the Torment and the Burning. The Scepter auto attack is not a projectile, so you can use it if you have nothing left from range. It will inflict some conditions. The skill 2 is another big AoE, which is not a projectile, which inflicts cripple and bleeding, deals a decent amount of damage. The skill 3 on the Scepter is the most important skill on this weapon set. It's an AoE base. You need to target an enemy, but it's an AoE around the target, boon strip and also torment, and a good amount of damage. The skill 4 is a projectile. It will generate some life force, but it's really hard to land in War vs Sword because of all the projectile reflection and mitigation. And then we have the skill 5, which deals a lot of damage based on how many boons you remove with this skill. So always try to focus enemies with 3 boons or more, so you will remove up to 3 boons and deal damage based on the boons removed. On these golems I will do like almost 0 damage because they have 0 boons, of course. And then we have the axe, which is another very good weapon set. You have the skill 2, which is a big damage dealer on a single target. The skill 3 is the most important skill on the axe, same as the scepter. Basically skill 3 are the best basically on both scepter and axe. You have a big AoE around you. This big AoE deals a huge amount of damage and also boon strip enemies. And also if you hit an enemy below 50% HP, you will trigger an additional explosion, which is called Unholy Burst. And as you can see, it will hit additionally 3 enemies. And it's a lot of damage if properly played, and also the cooldown is kinda low. Which is a big AoE in front of you, unblockable fear, so it's really good in War vs Sword where everyone has basically Aegis or infinite blocks. With this you can bypass everything except the stability, so make sure the enemy has no stability before using this, if you can, of course. I know it's not really easy to check it. And then we have the Locust Swarm. We get swiftness, we generate life force for every impact on our enemies, and we hit them for quite a bit of damage because they are like 10 impacts over 5 seconds, so it's a decent damage, I would say. The healing skill is a Sand Flare. It's an AoE barrier and also will remove boons from enemies, one boon, and convert it into Torment. So this is a very good skill because of the AoE barrier, but also because of the boon strip basically. And try to use it always on melee, where you can hit enemies and you can convert their boons into Torment. Then we have the Signet of the Locust. You press it, it's quite slow in the cast, but it's okay. It's a big AoE around you, removing 2 boons from 5 enemies and also healing you for a lot based on the boons which were removed, on the number of the boons removed. And then we have the Trail of Anguish. It's a big AoE below you which follows you basically on the ground. It leaves this trail which pulses burning and also gives you swiftness. Stability is a stun break, which we don't have other stun breaks on the Scourge, so it's really important. And it can hit up to 10 targets, so you can remove up to 10 boons with this skill. So it's a really good skill to use, especially when you're crossing onto the enemies, for example like this, and you leave behind this trail which will pulse damage and boon corruption. Then we have the Well of Corruption, unblockable well to do damage and most importantly to strip boons. Unblockable, really huge skill, and you need to position this really properly because it's your most important skill. And then we have the Ghastly Breach, which is basically really similar to the Well of Corruption, but you will convert the boons into Torment instead of just corrupting them. And also it's not unblockable and it's not ground targeted, it's just around you, but as you can see the AoE is bigger, it deals way more damage, applies Torment if you convert boons from enemies into Torment, of course. It will grant might on each pulse on the allies and also pulse on the enemies on each ally and burning on the enemy, sorry, not each ally, for each pulse, sorry, on slow on enemies, and then burning on enemies on each pulse. So you can remove like up to 20 boons from enemies with this skill, really similar to the Well of Corruption, even if it's not unblockable. The cooldown is higher, of course, but still is the best elite skill for WoW vs Sword on any Necromancer spec. If you choose to go Greatsword instead of Axe or instead of Scepter, it's fine. Most people probably will still run the Greatsword, but the skill 4, which is basically the only good skill on the Greatsword, has now 40 seconds cooldown instead of like 20 or 25 as it had before the nerfs. And then also the skill 5 is a really good pull, but still it's 0 damage and 30 seconds cooldown. I know if you land it on an enemy which has no stability, it's probably a death sentence, so they will just die. And also the skill 3 and the skill 2 are big damage dealers, but they are so slow and so melee, so I don't know. I don't really know if the Greatsword is worth anymore. Maybe in the most organized environment, yes, it's worth it because you can coordinate the boon strip from AoE, for example, from the Virtuoso, and then you can immediately pull with the Grasping Darkness on the Greatsword. But if you are in a PUG environment, in my opinion, Axe and Warhorn together with the Scepter and Focus could be better. Now it's time for the commentary, which is in my opinion the most important part and where you learn the most from my videos. So this was a bad fight, my teammates were already fighting, I was behind, I just joined the fight. I know it's not really a good clip, but it shows you really how much boon strip you can do if you properly place your skills. This is almost ideal environment when you can cast every skill from outside basically. So let's get into it. Okay, here I start from Scepter. As you can see, I was on Axe. I immediately swapped to Scepter because Scepter is the best option from range. Immediately start casting my F1s, and then I cast my F3 because every F1 has a small cooldown in between. So between each F1 you should be casting something else if you can. I know sometimes it's not really easy to track it. So skill 3 from the Scepter, and I do some strips. Keep an eye on the strips. As you can see right now I am at around 2 strips and the first one is at 66. So I keep casting my F1s and F1 again. At this point I am with the commander and we are starting to clash on the enemies. We are ready to go to double dodge onto the enemies and to clash onto them. So skill 2 from the Scepter. I immediately cast my Trail of Anguish, so whenever I will double dodge, I will leave the trail on the ground, which will pulse burning on the enemies and boon strip and give me stability and swiftness also to me and the allies. So I'm almost ready. Skill 2, which is ranged. I start casting every skill from F5 to F2. The F5 should go first because it takes like 3 or 4 seconds to explode, so the enemies have all the time to move out. In this case they didn't really move out, but each millisecond you press it earlier is worth it, so try to start from the F5 almost all the time basically. The F4 is a fear, AoE fear, almost instant, so you can interrupt AoE. Okay, let's start. Immediately dropping my well behind, you can ground target it, of course, it's the Well of Corruption. And then Ghastly Breach, which is a big AoE around me, I cast it and the Eye of Cerus starts spinning and doing damage. Okay, let me reset a bit. Ghastly Breach, immediately the Signet of the Locust, which has a big radius, really similar to the Ghastly Breach, but I think it's even bigger. And then I try to stay melee with the healing skill, which will provide barrier on me and on the allies, and also boon strip the enemies, 1 boon per target, and convert it into torment. At this point I can start swapping to axe, and immediately you see I start casting the skill 3, which is big AoE around me, pulsing, doing damage, a lot of damage, and also removing a boon from enemies, boon stripping. And then I have blindness, I try to remove it with the skill 5 from the Warhorn, which pulses damage around me. This is a very good skill to remove the blindness, because you can cast other stuff and the blindness goes wasted with the skill 5 basically. And then skill 4, which is a big AoE unblockable fear. I think I was blind even now. F1 again, F1 again. The skill 3 has a really similar cooldown to the weapon swap, which is like 10 seconds. So you need to swap to axe and immediately press your skill 3, and then you should cast other skills, and before swapping back to the scepter you should cast another skill 3. And in this time you should have also the skill 3 from the scepter up again, or almost up. You see skill 3 from the axe, and then I could swap again. I find a target to land here, the skill 2, immediately swap to the scepter. Sorry, okay, skill 3, big AoE bone strip, skill 2, skill 5 on this guy, and every skill from F1, F2, F3. And the fight is over basically. There is this melee train here, skill 3 from the axe, skill 4. You see double interrupt with the skill 4 from the Warhorn. I know the fight was almost over and probably they had no cooldowns for the stability, but this is what I played this weapon for basically. Skill 5 and skill 2, skill 6 again. Trail of Anguish is ready, I could use it, but the fight is over. I want to replay it again so you can see how much the strips go up whenever I press my buttons. We can see it with normal speed. Just check out the strips here. Whenever I cast my... You see what happened in like 2 or 3 seconds with the well and the Ghastly Breach and the F5 proccing. It just was insane. Top strips by a lot even. Okay guys, this was all for today's video. Please remember to share the video if you enjoyed it, and if you have friends who wanna play the Scourge or any other build, you can check from my channel of course, and like and subscribe. And if you also want to support me further, you can also click the join button below my videos to support me at the cost of like €2 per month, which is not a lot, but if many of you can do it, you can really support me on this hobby I have. This is not my real job, of course. I have almost no money from these videos I make, but I enjoy it and I do them. So feel free to do it if you can. Thank you for watching and see you on to the next video. I'm preparing a lot of builds and it will take some time to test, and also I'm working to a tier list, updated tier list for War vs Sword Zerg fights. Stay tuned and have a great night. Bye bye.